I can't believe I'm saying this, but Ben Shapiro is so desperate for the approval of the right wing that is abandoning him as they embrace Nazism and see his pro-Zionist, pro-Israel positions as increasingly anti-American. He's now got the balls to actually criticize Trump. I remember back in 2015 and 2016 when Ben Shapiro would debate people that were critical of Trump, and oftentimes they would defend every single thing about him by saying, well, he hasn't been president yet. You're just criticizing his words. You have no actions to criticize. Now that alone was bullshit, but oftentimes it was true for many. All they had to go off of to criticize Trump were his words. He hadn't served in office yet, so at the end of the day, there was no policy history to criticize him for. But then he took office. And the promise from people like Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, etc. was they were not sycophants. They would hold Trump's feet to the fire if he did fuck up once he became president. Then from 2017 all the way to 2020, they did not do this. They never once held Trump's feet to the fire. They made excuses for him constantly. And now he's president again. And Ben Shapiro, the same man who walked back that promise before, is actually holding Trump to account, but only because he has found himself in such a desperate situation, because simply being a MAGA sycophant with a camera ain't gonna pay the bills anymore. Let's see how this is going for him. If you end up enjoying this video, hit that like button and subscribe and comment down below who up Xandering they haul so I can pay the bills. And yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you end up enjoying. Leave a hype on the video if you can. And let's get right into it without any further ado.
Democrats win the mayoralty in Miami, which has been a Republican stronghold for 30 years. What does that mean for Republicans? Plus, we get into the affordability debate. First, this year, while you're taking care of everybody else on your nice list, don't forget about yourself.
The shilling.
Our Daily Wire Plus Christmas memberships are Dragon site to grab your annual membership for 40% off. Alrighty, folks, so
skip the
some
shilling.
Flags are going up. Some red warning sirens are beginning to sound about Republican hopes in 2026 and, yes, in 2028. Because American politics is like a pendulum. If it swings one direction one moment, then wait a minute, it'll probably swing back the other direction naturally. Right now, Miami...
I kind of get the vibe it's like a 9-year cycle. A little longer than like 2 presidential terms. That's how long it feels like the cycle takes to make a full rotation. 9 years.
Miami has been Republican for decades. It's been Republican for decades, specifically because there's a large Cuban Republican population, very anti-communist. Well, for the first time in 30 years, Democrats have now taken control of...
He's not wrong. The Cubans in Florida especially are very conservative. They are the most conservative Latino group in America. In fact, like among other Latino groups, Cubans are considered they're almost excluded from a lot of the general Latino identity in America, because Cubans have such a recent political history that has polarized them to be so conservative, generally, not always, but generally, that a lot of the Latino community, even with the right-wing bent a lot of them have taken, during the last election, a lot of them don't fuck with Cubans, low-key. It's a whole thing.
Miami, that's after candidate Eileen Higgins clinched the city's mayoral election.
Yep.
Higgins beat out...
Dude, a Democrat winning in Florida. Good news coming out of Florida, of all places, is wild. I got a whole segment dedicated to this I plan to do later in the stream. Or maybe we'll kind of merge those two topics into this segment. That'll work, actually. I think that's what we'll do.
Trump-backed Republican Emilio Gonzalez in the Florida city's runoff Tuesday night. She becomes the first Democratic mayor in the city since 1998, according to the New York Post. Woo. The victory is an upset for GOP...
First Dem mayor in Miami in my lifetime by 1 year.
Lawmakers around the country who rallied behind Gonzalez because, of course, South Florida has turned into a very red area over the course of the last 10 years or so. Florida itself was a very competitive area for Democrats up until about 2018, when Governor Ron DeSantis won an extremely narrow election against a man, Andrew Gillum, who would later be caught up in flagrante delicte with some awkward situations involving drugs in a hotel room, mail...
I don't care, Ben. A lot of I don't think people realize this. Florida is unique from all the other red states. It's a very hard red state, make no mistake, but it's different. Like, the culture of Florida and the way that people live in Florida, like most red states that have a strong Trump population, the Trump population, like the Trumper population, is made up of like rural, low income for the most part, or not super well off, like rural Americans, right? But in Florida, that's the place where you see the big Trump yacht clubs, where it's like a parade of yachts going through the main bays in the cities, and they're all rocking their Trump flags, and they've got like Trump stickers everywhere. It's just a massive Trump boat parade. These are very common. I know that there was the one boat parade crash that everyone heard about years ago, but these Florida Trump boat parades are very common. They're like part of the Florida culture at this point. So a lot of Trump's big support base in Florida specifically are wealthy boomers and millennials that obviously are well off, comfortable. They live on the beach, they've got boats, and they don't want to pay taxes. And they don't like wokeness for whatever they know of it, whatever Fox News has told them about it. That is more or less a lot, like the winning majority that you need to get to win elections in Florida. Miami, probably one of the easier cities in all of Florida to win as a Democrat. If I were to run as a Democrat in any Floridian city, I would pick Miami. But yeah, this is still a pretty big deal. Make no mistake.
Prostitutes, perhaps. Anyway, that was relevant. That happened after the election. That was a narrow election in 2018. In 2022, DeSantis blew out his political opposition. And in 2024, Florida went to President Trump by a very heavy margin. Well, Miami has been Republican for a very long time. Apparently now it has turned blue, despite the fact that Republicans rallied in favor of the Republican candidate. President Trump threw his weight behind the Republican candidate. He was joined.
Seems like people are not happy with being unable to afford things.
By Ted Cruz, Rick Scott, and Governor DeSantis, but it didn't matter very much. Apparently, Higgins, the Democrat, had led Gonzalez 36-19 during the first round of voting. Amid a crowded field in November, she was the favorite to win this time. But this is a ding in the Republican armor for sure. Again, some of the early bellwethers are not moving in Republican directions right now. It is also a warning bell for Republicans.
Dude, Dem victory is on the horizon. And when Dems can have victory, that's when socialism can actually flourish. Unfortunately, and I think we're all experiencing it right now, socialism doesn't exactly flourish under fascism. Would you guys say that socialism culturally, politically, policy-wise, or in any way whatsoever is flourishing right now or doing well right now? I'd argue that this fascist takeover has depowered socialist movements substantially.
With regard to the Hispanic vote in the United States, President Trump won an outsized share of Hispanics in the last election cycle. The polling shows that many, many Hispanics are falling off the Republican bandwagon right now because Trump solved some of the big issues like closing the southern border, but he has alienated an awful lot of Hispanic Republicans with some of the, shall we say, more public-facing ICE actions. He has also alienated.
I love that, public-facing. Not that they were brutal or bad or inhumane, but they were just too public-facing. Too many people saw.
Alienated some Hispanic Republicans because a lot of Hispanic Republicans were driven away from the Democratic Party by their social radicalism and DEI. Democrats have been smartly on a national level, sort of moving away from those discussions and back toward, wait for it, affordability. So this is the issue of the day, affordability. Now, President Trump has labeled affordability a Democratic hoax, and I totally understand where he is coming from because affordability is a broad buzzword that encompasses many things. Right? Doesn't encompass the
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. Like, anyone who tries to, like, muddy the waters around this is being deliberately facetious, and I'm so happy that most Americans will not and cannot fall for this nonsense right now. Ben is a very wealthy man, so he can rationalize an argument like this to himself, but let's be completely real. Everybody knows what everybody means when they say affordability in the context of economic policy in America. We're talking about rent, food, and every other bill, utility bills, and transportation. Like the basic things, your nut, the things you need to be able to pay for to, keep going next month. You know what I mean? That's affordability. If those things are unaffordable, there is no, life is unaffordable. That's what people are concerned about right now. And then beyond that, simply having money to spend and save, that's a whole other tier of affordability that people would very much like to go back to. But right now, countless Americans are missing their car payments. They're missing their bill payments. They're missing bills. That's a big deal.
Inflation rate. If we're talking inflation rate, Trump has brought down inflation to manageable levels. It's still higher than it should be, but
doesn't matter. Inflation being at manageable levels doesn't mean prices aren't out of control.
It's not riding at 9, 10, 11% like it was under Joe Biden. If we're talking about energy prices actually are norming out under President Trump. When people say affordability, it is fair to say that very few people ever think that things are quote unquote affordable. Nothing is affordable, right? If you are
This is true from Ben, but he would have never said this under Biden when the economy was experiencing record recovery, like literally faster and better recovery than the whole rest of the world post-COVID. Like Ben would have never made or accepted this argument that no one is ever happy with the economy, no matter how good it is. That's true. That is a true statement, but it rings hollow, always, no matter who's in charge. And now Ben's the one using this argument, and it's like, sorry, buddy. Won't work when you guys use it either.
Struggling economically at any time in your life. This means inherently you're going to think things are unaffordable. But really, when people talk
Populism is a double-edged sword, and now it's y'all guys' turn to get cut.
Talk about affordability, what do they mean? They mean that things are less affordable for them now than they were back in 2019. And that is what the polling data shows. That is what Americans think today. A new poll from Politico shows that nearly half of Americans said they find groceries, utility bills, healthcare, housing, and transportation difficult to afford. More than a quarter, 27%, said they have skipped a medical checkup because of costs within the last 2 years. 23% said they've skipped a prescription dose for the same reason. More than a third of Americans say they could not afford to attend a professional sporting event with family or friends. 46% said they could not pay for a vacation that involves air travel. Now, it is worthwhile noting, all of those numbers are minority numbers. Those are not broad majority numbers.
Dude, yes, the percentage of people that had to skip medication prescriptions because they couldn't afford them is a minority of people. But Ben, if a even somewhat significant minority that's like, oh, that's a decent percentage. It's not the majority, but it's still a decent percentage, are that desperate financially, then you have to imagine there's a lot more people who are on the margins, not too far off. They're doing better, but they're not doing too much better.
A quarter of Americans saying that they have to skip a medical appointment, or less than half of Americans saying they can't pay for a vacation.
Yeah, if a quarter can't go to the doctor or keep their medications up, then imagine how many Americans are just a bit better off than that. That's a lot, Ben. 25% is a lot.
Involving air travel. With that said, overall, Americans are dissatisfied with how far their money is going right now. According to Politico, only 22% of voters who cast their ballots for President Trump in 2024 said that tariffs are helping the U.S. economy both now and in the long term. Meanwhile, when it comes to things like college costs,
suck.
62% of Americans say college isn't worth it because it costs too much or doesn't provide enough benefits. When it comes to food prices, half of those surveyed say they find it...
The value of a college degree is definitely dropping, for sure. And that's a big, big problem. The cost of college is going up. There are programs that you can apply for, and you are probably going to get approved for if you put some decent effort into your schooling and you have a decent GPA. There's a good chance that you can get a decent amount of your college tuition paid for. If you did academics, like any kind of extracurricular sports. I got 2 varsity letters. I think that made me eligible for some scholarships, depending on what schools I went to. The unfortunate thing is it takes so much research. The average, college aspiring teenager who's in their junior or senior year of high school, and they're looking at colleges, they are probably not going to have, their parents might not even have the required information to know how to get a bunch of their school debt. And I don't mean student debt. I mean what they need to pay to go to school. I don't know if they're going to know what they need to know to get those scholarships figured out, to figure out what schools they're going to be best to apply for to get the most financial support. So a lot of people just end up having a shitload of student loan debt coming out of college. And oftentimes, depending on what degree they got, and even if it's a good degree, whether or not they find a job to make use of it, that student debt haunts them for a while. And so a lot of Americans are becoming increasingly less faithful in college and higher education. But let me be very, very, very clear. Getting a college education in America is setting you up to be more successful than literally any other start you could have in life anywhere else on the planet, besides being born to a billionaire or millionaire family. As a born into the working class person anywhere on the planet, nothing sets you up better for life than an American college education. Do not throw away the idea of going to college. It wasn't for me, don't get me wrong, not for me, but if you even think it might be for you, I highly recommend it. particularly if you're American. Nothing will set you up better for success more.
It's difficult to pay for food. A majority, 55%, blame the Trump administration for the high prices. Again, some of that is based on tariff concerns. When it comes to housing costs, a huge percentage of Americans are worried about housing costs and home buying. Only 10% of those who identify as MAGA Republicans believe the Trump administration is responsible for housing costs they see as unfavorable. But that figure is 3 times higher for non-MAGA
hard to deny that when Trump is pushing for 50-year mortgages, Ben.
Republican respondents. Nearly half of Americans find it difficult to afford health care, according to that Politico poll as well. And this isn't rooted in nothing. I asked our friends and sponsors over at Comet, a project of perplexity, how much have rental costs escalated since 2019 in the United States? Health insurance costs, food prices, college costs. And here's what Comet says. Rental, housing, health insurance, food, college have all risen substantially since 2019, with food and rent up roughly 20 to 25% or more. Health insurance premiums up about 25%. Average college tuition up around 8 to 12%, depending on the sector.
I'm willing to bet this is all AI generated. This looks like it's written by ChatGPT, or Grok, or Google Gemini.
I also asked Comet, how much have incomes risen in that same period non-inflation adjusted? And the reason that I'm not adjusting for inflation there is if you're talking about the increase in food prices, some of that is the inflationary increase in food prices brought about by the Biden administration. So you have to use the same.
Yeah, while inflation as like the tracked percentage of inflation is in a manageable rate, like the inflation rate is in a decent spot right now, just because overall inflation isn't terrible at the moment doesn't mean that where the inflation is happening hasn't been catastrophic. The problem is the inflation is happening primarily in necessities. Groceries are what are experiencing massive inflation right now. The irony could not be thicker. You can cut it with a butter knife right now. The fact that Trump ran on the eggs being too expensive, and then immediately he takes office, and we enter a year-long stint of meat and beef, especially, and eggs and milk being, in some cases, like 60% more expensive, in some cases 100% more expensive or more for beef. Beef's been really fucked lately. I have not had a burger in a minute. It's rough out here.
Ruler. According to Comet, non-inflation adjusted nominal household incomes are up by roughly 10 to 15% since 2019, which is less than the increase in rents, food, and health insurance costs over the same period. So, yes, you're making more dollars than you were in 2019, but those dollars aren't going quite as far. So both things can be true. Things are less affordable than they were 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And also, when Democrats talk about the problems of affordability, they're neglecting the fact that most of those problems emerged under Joe Biden. That is what Trump means when he says that.
They haven't, though, Ben. Ben, when will you ever tussle with the economic reality, the undisputed fact among economists that America was the fastest growing economy post-COVID, which was Biden's presidency, mind you. COVID happened under Trump. Biden inherited the COVID problem, and through that, grew America's economy more than any other country and recovered America's economy faster than any other country on the planet. This is an undisputable fact among economists, left and right. But he can't admit that. Joe Biden has to be the devil for these people. And for the left, to be fair.
That the affordability argument is a hoax. He means they created an inflationary spiral that jacked up prices, and then they handed him a bad situation. And then he has brought inflation down to manageable levels, and now they're shouting about affordability. They can't shout about inflation because if they say inflation, everyone's going to look at Joe Biden and look at Trump and realize Trump brought the inflation rates down. So if they talk about affordability as a catch-all basket, that is a much more lucrative political line for them to pursue. All right, coming up, we'll get to President Trump talking about affordability. Is this narrative going to play first? This episode is sponsored by Birch Gold. Our first advertiser at the Daily Wire was...
God, what a grifter. I'm so glad he's falling off, along with the rest of the Daily Wire. Now, to fact-check that, I guess I don't really need to fact-check it, just call out the lie. When Democrats talk about affordability, they are talking about inflation, technically. They're talking about the buying power of the U.S. dollar dropping when it comes to necessities such as groceries and utility bills and rent. So while yes, inflation rate overall is manageable or in a healthy percentage range right now, the actual prices are insane. And the buying power of people's paychecks is horrible for the things that every American has to buy. Every American has to buy groceries. Every American has to pay rent or a mortgage, right? Well, almost every American. Right? So, like, these are people that, like, Ben is just speaking from this position of immense privilege here. Ben really fell off after his charity scandal? When did he do a charity scandal? I didn't hear about that. I figured the big fall off was primarily due to the fact that he's such a shill for Israel, and right now, literally nobody in America is on their knees for Israel except the boomers. The boomer evangelicals, or just like Gen X and every generation older, will always, for some reason, worship Israel. Not for some reason, there are reasons, but of like the young people, nobody likes Israel. Especially among Gen Z, nobody likes Israel, left or right. I don't know. I'm glad to see the Daily Wire falling off, though, I gotta say. Well, if you want to keep me from falling off, because you like this video and you enjoy my content, consider leaving a like and comment down below who up Xandering they haul to boost the video in the algorithm. It really does help. And of course, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell icon if you want to see more from me in the future, and hype the video if you can. Regardless of how you support me, though, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and as always, I hope you have a good one.